Carson says, any comment about the problem Trinity faced with travelling to France? Well, I'm not on furlough now, am I? So I've been mutually consented. Well, the French, as we've learned, countries are allowed to take control of their borders, take back control until you can make a point against it. Like Novak Djokovic. He's got some interesting supporters, hasn't he? But
not sure I'd want Nigel Farage in my camp for anything.
By the way, we should have started with the national anthem like they're going to do every day.
Oh, okay.
At 6 o'clock in the morning when no one's watching. So it's like watching this programme. It's an interesting one, Carsten, isn't it? Because the question I would ask of players is why? Why? Not. I don't. If you've got a genuine reason,
and there are medical exemptions,
then that's fine. If you believe something your mate's told you that he saw on Facebook, that's not fine. And again, it's why you take supplements. All teams take supplements because they're all sponsored by supplement companies. We all know they put things in their bodies to make them better at being rugby players or whatever, or supposedly better. We know that when players are injured, they sometimes take injections to make them play through a game. We all take paracetamol all the time for aches and pains. No one reads a leaflet. There's side effects to everything. There are side effects to every decision we make in life has some kind of consequence. Now, I would ask the players, why? That's all. And if they can come up with a decent reason, then, and if I was running a club and I had players in that situation, I would say to you, why? Because you might be putting your job at risk, which I know is an extreme scenario, but when you see players tweet about other sports people, which is easily debunked. I mean, I know we're not all experts like people who write letters to League Express last week, but I just asked them why. Not in any terms of, I know everything's politicised nowadays, but just why. With everything else that you do, why this?
I think it's an issue for the clubs and not so much the game. I don't think the integrity of the game is necessarily questioned. I think it's how each club deals with whoever is in its club that it needs to deal with. Now, whether that means in future writing something into a contract, whether it means negotiating now on the basis of the fact that if you make a decision not to play that is non-rugby related, there is a provision that says you don't get paid for that game. I think the other thing about rugby league is it's a team sport. And I think, again, you win, lose, draw together. So I think if somebody is putting the team in jeopardy, if they haven't got a reason other than, a medical one to follow that line, clearly, I think that's the issue for me, that it isn't the integrity of the competition that's questioned. It has to deal with rules of the country it's going to play in. By the same token, I'm pretty sure that, we've had clubs like New Zealand Warriors who have decamped to a different country for an entire year because that's what was needed to keep the competition going. It's not about the individual in the club, it's about the competition.
I think I said before Christmas when some players at some clubs were tweeting things about footballers and whatever who'd collapsed or this, that and the other. I find it A, disingenuous, and B, nothing short of offensive when in our sport we have seen tragically young people die in the last before COVID was ever a thing, before anyone knew what it was. And I think it's a difficult one because, Carson, I'm sure you're coming from the same perspective, and I'm sure Gav is here, where he says, bottom line, if they've been fine to bugger off to the sun on their holidays during the off-season, they can't have much excuse for travelling. I see pictures of players in pubs and stuff. It's... And I know it's a big debate in Australia at the moment in terms of what players are being asked to do and not to do. It's difficult when you are not a professional athlete to understand what they do, and I know Danica doesn't like the word sacrifice, but to us they are sacrifices that they make to have as long a career and as successful a career as possible. But it's difficult for us because we'd all love to be out there playing. We'd all do whatever we could to be the best at what we wanted to do, but we can't because we don't have those abilities to do so. so we don't have that knowledge of what they're going through. But it is hard when you sit on the sidelines as we are now and think, right, if you don't go to the pub for a year, you could extend your career. If you have this vaccination, you can go and play in France in a match. What about the World Cup? We don't know what's going to happen in 5 years, in 3 years' time. They might not be allowed to play in the World Cup.
I think the other thing is that, you know, we published a book a while ago about a player who brought up the issue of prescription drugs. Perfectly legal to be given them, they're on prescription. But if you become addicted to it, if it becomes part of your routine, if it affects your mood, your sleep pattern, all of that players are being asked to deal with on a day-to-day basis. There's not a lot of questioning of what goes on. It's deemed to be performance enabling rather than performance enhancing, and a lot of them after a game will go down that route. I have absolutely total respect for anybody that says I will not put anything in my body. Absolutely entitled to do that, but you can't pick and choose. You can't say I'm prepared to allow myself to have treatment that involves steroids or whatever it might be, but I'm not prepared to be injected against a virus where, what is it, 82% of the players now are taking that option. I think the other thing that we need to look at beyond each individual club is that the economic impact of perhaps losing some games to broadcast partners, and the reason why Australia have gone so heavy on trying to restrict their players, keep them in almost back in bubbles, even though they're not really in use in the way that they were in the states that they're playing, that keeping them out of indoor areas where they're more at risk than they would be if they're out on a training paddock. All of that is because the price of not being able to play some games on television means that the whole of the competition would be affected. We cannot afford to pay back monies to Sky if some people decide they perhaps don't want to be vaccinated for issues other than moral or medical, and the game itself then is in a financial penalty situation that it cannot afford at the moment.
I said it during the first lockdown, which seems like a million years ago now, but people need to be aware of their actions in terms of the future of their employments. And as we've seen with one person, it can end up with you losing your job. And it could be the whole of the sport. And that's melodramatic. It probably won't be, but it could be. Yeah. It's a difficult one because, as I say, if you just gone there blind, like sheep, blindly queued up at the vaccination centre and got your bit of cardboard and you're happy, then it's not an issue, is it? But people want to make issues out of things. It's not picking on Wakefield, but they're the club who've come out and said something.
I also think that it depends who the players are. I mean, you would worry that those clubs that are coming out saying it could be an issue, they might know that within their club it's the 6 players that are going to be very important to them this year, if it's 6 or whoever it might be. But every club has injuries. Every club has players who are suspended. So if you are now told, where are we, 2-3 weeks away from the start of the season, you are not going to be able to go if you are unvaccinated, you have to make provision for that. Your squad has to be strong enough to be able to cope with that.
And we can't go down the shambles that football is in the moment in the Premier League, where games are being called off willy-nilly, despite the fact that we know they've all got 1 million kids. I mean, someone brought up the example of Bayern Munich at the weekend. Typical Germans, efficient and all that. But they had a lot of young players on their bench who I don't think they've ever played in the league, but they just got on with it. And we've got to get on with it, because otherwise...
I don't think it impacts on the integrity of the competition. I think that is the wrong line to go down if you want to protest about it. Whether it aids Catalan and Toulouse, we'll have to wait and see. We're talking about dropping a lot of the restrictions over here, so you would think that they've got some unvaccinated players in their squads who it's not going to apply to, and that's where perhaps it becomes a little bit more unfair. But look what Catalan had to do last year by way of the way they travelled over here, the way they couldn't go anywhere before a game, they had to fly in at their cost, normally hiring the aeroplane, sit in the Totally Wicked Stadium on their own for 3 hours. They actually had their best season of away form because they found a way of coping with that. So let's not focus too much on that, because
No.
there actually are some
Yeah.
positives at the moment.
Imagine someone who refuses to get vaccinated gets picked to go on tour in Australia if they're happy to kick out the biggest name in tennis. A UK rugby league player's got no chances, Gav. Yeah, but, I mean, the biggest hypothetical there is going on tour to Australia. That's not happening, Gav. Come on now. Come on.